Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 3, Episode 7, The Siren. In this episode, Colin Robinson wants to learn more about where he comes from as an energy vampire, but their journey to Plum Island gets cut off by a very enticing woman who remains enticing to Colin even after she reveals herself. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. What's up, Max, if you're out there? This episode was a really strange one to me, and I didn't dislike it, but it felt a little bit more frenetic than usual. And I think a lot of that has to do with the weird Best Buy trip that happens in the midst of everything and how unresolved what goes on with the Siren winds up being. I'm sort of interested in the Siren coming back, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So first thing, I kind of want to talk about what's going on with Nadja's ghost, out of the gate, and then kind of back into the Siren storyline. So Nadja's ghost, we start this episode off by finding out that the accommodation that has been made between her and Nandor is that they will run the Vampiric Council on opposing days, which Evil Mabel tells us really is a waste of time, because all it is them each undoing the things that the person before them has done. And I would just like to point out once again, as I have mentioned, that I feel like Nadja is really the brains of this operation, that the things she is saying she's going to undo that Nandor does, I feel like it is quite valid to undo them. And I am just still firmly in her corner in terms of who I think should be in charge. That said, one of the things that she gets really mad about is this t-shirt that's going to say sponsored by the Vampiric Council. And she's like, people aren't supposed to know about that. And I was like, honestly, Nadja, nobody would believe it. Everybody would think that it was a funny little gimmick joke thing. I bet it would turn into its own brand that you could use as a front and probably make money off of, and nobody would ever even consider that it was a real thing. You could go very public with this. It's the same idea as Harry Dresden listing himself in the Yellow Pages as a wizard for hire. It's not, nobody takes it seriously, and those who do, nobody would believe them. So I think probably it would be fine. But I also think that her approach to it is the more logical approach. So yeah, it's fine. And we have this really odd, they're talking to Scott Bakula at the start of this little bit that we see them in. She's got him on a Zoom call. And I am not sure if it's supposed to be, I think that they think he's related to Dracula. And I just love the sort of he's really puzzled by it, but he's also willing to talk to them about where he's from. He's not as much as he doesn't want to be having this conversation, he's not rude to them. I really appreciate him. He's doing his best. He looks just kind of what are we? And I love Nadja saying, I apologize for my associate. And I'm like, Nadja, you're the one who got him on this call. You don't know what you're doing in this respect either. So that's fair. I don't know what your goal was here, if you thought you could get his input on something, but what are you doing? Also, I found out like somewhat recently that the word bacula is like the name for a bat's penis. And this is something that somebody told me. So actually I'm saying this and I'm realizing like, maybe that's not true. But I feel like I remember looking into it, and it was years ago now. So have fun with that Google search, kids. So they, like I said, they're undoing everything that they each have been doing. And evil Mabel is just beside herself. She's like, we had one other dude who was really bad at this job. She says Paduk the Enraged, who also shared his duties with what he believed was a talking footstool. But even he had good days, and these two have no good days. And I love that she is just beside herself. Nandor and Nadja are patting themselves on the back for the elegance of this solution. And the description that Nadja uses is it's a real Israel-Palestine situation. And Nandor says, yes, a win-win. Babes, sweeties. This reminds me of there's a scene in Clueless where she's like watching the news with her stepbrother. Excuse me, guys, I've been sick, so forgive me. I'm having to clear my throat here and there. But she's like watching the news and she looks really puzzled, and he's like, "What's the matter? You look kind of confused." And she says, "Well, I thought they declared peace in the Middle East." And I remember the first time I saw that scene, I was like a little bit too young to really understand the joke. And then when I got older and I got to that part, I was like, oh man, that's a really good example of a thing that feels like I'm not even going to try and learn what the deal is with this situation, because it goes back so far that knowing where to even begin, and all of the times that there has been like a fake out that it's resolved, it's just kind of overwhelming. So I feel like I'm going to stay ignorant on it. And that's not a great place to be, but we can only do so much. And I should mention too, that the promotion that has sponsored by the Vampiric Council on it, this is an agreement for our Vampiric Council of the Tri-State area to be the proud sponsors of the upcoming fun run for MS. It's a good idea because it is good for that humans are healthy. Healthier humans mean healthier eating choices for us. Now, as this is all happening, we have Nadja's ghost in the doll. I'm going to just call her the Nadja doll, I think, from now on. It's mentioned later that Nadja didn't come up with a separate name for her, and everybody feels like that's very telling. I mean, what would you do, though? Because as far as she herself is concerned, she is Nadja, right? She's her ghost, but she's as much Nadja as this vampire version of Nadja is. So I feel like if I were her and somebody tried to give me a different name, I would be a little bit like, why should I give up my name? You're the one who is undead. Technically, I'm more myself than you are. So you should change your name, But yeah, she is in the hallway when Nadja storms by her and tries to grab at her and be like, hey, what's going on? And then Nadja shoos her off there and tells her not now. She follows Nadja into the room as she's arguing with Nandor and is at the floor, because she's a foot and a half tall, and begins pulling at her skirts and is trying to get her to lift her up and just keeps saying, pay attention to me. I'm right here. Pick me up. And she is getting really frustrated with the fact that nobody is paying attention to her. When everybody leaves the room, she is literally just sitting on the floor in the middle of the room, and nobody has even noticed that she was there. And this is one of those things where I'm like, Nadja not paying attention to her in this moment make sense to me because she's so upset. But the vibe that we're getting later is pretty much that Nadja has been in this sort of a state of constant upset for a while now because this job is like getting to her. So while I want to be like, well, you know, she's irritated because of this particularly stupid thing that Nandor did, it feels like most of her job is just undoing particularly stupid things that Nandor did. And if that is most of her job, then this is probably how she's acting all the time. And I'm just going to say, like, this is part of the reason that I never wanted children, is because you have to make space to give attention to a tiny being whose entire world revolves around you. And you have to make that space in amongst all of your regular, like, daily worries. And your regular daily worries, the number of those go up with the introduction of a child into the household. That's just going to be like a new fun additional thing to be worrying about. So all I could think here was about, like, obviously everything for me lately is coming back to having the puppies in my life and dealing with them, and just how often I am just trying to just feed them. I am just trying to put insulation in their doghouse. I am just trying to, like, do a thing. And it's like, hey, what are you doing? What's that? What's that? What's this? What's that? What are you doing? Huh? And it is just so much. And I feel like I want Nadja's, like, ghost to get her own hobby. She's got enough intelligence that she could be doing something that's, like, significant, even if she hasn't got a body. We are doing most things virtually now anyways these days. I feel like if she could just learn how to use a computer, maybe things would be all set. Maybe they could set her to dealing with designing the website and stuff like that. Since she and Nadja have basically the same taste, I would assume. Maybe they don't anymore, but I'm going to say they do. Why not? It doesn't seem like Nadja has changed all that much since the time when she died, based on, you know, the way that she talks. So anyway, this is the first moment that we really see of her, like, putzing around, not knowing what to do with herself, nobody paying any attention. And then we go to the, like, room where they do the talking head interviews. And she and Guillermo are together in this room. And she is lamenting the fact that nobody even notices that she's here. And Guillermo is like, really? This is what you're going to do. I'm going to be here in the interview room with a doll all the time now. What is it he says? Just get all the B team interviews done at the same time. Real nice guys. And this is when she says, boo fucking who, my legs are 5 centimeters long. And honestly, I was a little bit surprised that she didn't, like, take exception to the fact that he called her a B interview. I thought that she would be a little bit more defensive, but it seems like she is kind of accepting of her, like, position and everything in a way that surprised me a little bit. And he just rips off his mic and storms out. And that is practically all we see of Guillermo until the Best Buy scene, which is honestly very little of him. It's mostly he's in the background, like, gathering things, handling carts, but he doesn't have all that many lines. So it's a very Guillermo light episode. And I was a little bit disappointed by that because I just really have been into what they're doing with him lately. So I want more of whatever's going on with him. There is, like, one scene where he is being sort of, I don't know if harassed is quite the right word, but Evil Mabel is in his bedroom and she says something about how this photo, he was handsome then and handsome now, right? And he's like, yeah, you've said that like a bunch of times. So clearly she's just like around him and being weird. And when he has to get up and leave his room, she is like wanting to stay and hang out in there without him. When he tells her to leave his room and not touch anything, she reaches around and touches everything. I am not sure what to make of the attitude that she is like displaying towards him. Is it that she just wants to eat him? Is it that he is just kind of a non-entity? So she enjoys just pestering him for the fun of it and knows that he can't really do anything? Is it that she like it doesn't feel like a sexual attraction to me, but I don't know what this lady acts like when it is a sexual attraction. So she just may express her crushes in a really weird way. There was something about this tied with that one moment in a previous episode where she talks about how she was behind him the whole time smelling his musk. That feels like maybe it is supposed to be a bit of an attraction. But I just can't tell if that's what's supposed to be going on here, because she is such a little weirdo that reading anything that she does with the eyes of a regular person, I don't feel like I'm going to get an accurate reading. You know what I'm saying? So Asher is in the chat. I read it as a crush from the jump. She's just super weird. Okay. So it is a crush. She's just expressing it in a really strange way. That is very interesting. This is one of those where I'm like, look, I get the feeling that it's going to be said that Guillermo is at least, if he's not like gay, then he's at least bi. There's a vibe here. So I am curious whether there would be any circumstance in which he would be interested, but it seems very much like there is no chance for her here. It's not even that he is like unsure of what's happening. He is just kind of like, what are you doing here? What is the point of you? I don't think he likes her in his space. And it's kind of funny because like a part of me, and I know that this is sort of like, it's kind of fucked up, but a part of me is like, Guillermo, you want to become a vampire so bad. Why don't you just humor her? And maybe you can get her to turn you. But that's not really the way he wants this, right? Like, he wants it to be the guy he's been working for, that he's got basically a big crush on, to be the one to turn him. Why would he like accept this from some fucking other chick? So I guess that wouldn't work. It's just me sort of seeing things in a one-to-one, and it's a lot more than that for him. Like, obviously, I think he sees it as essentially, I would be entering into like a relationship with him. Like, it would be as good as a proposal, I feel like he would think. Which, we haven't really met. Have we met anybody who has made them all vampires? Was the Baron the one that made them vampires? I couldn't remember if he is like, I know that he was really old, but I can't remember if he was their maker specifically or not. I know that Laszlo was created by Nadja, but I can't remember anybody other than him who made them. Asher says she's got the crazy eyes when she talks about him. She's got the crazy eyes anyway, though. She got crazy eyes. They cast so well. I love her, though. So anyway, fucking Nadja doll bails. She just like leaves in the middle of the night because they are not paying attention to her, and she has decided that enough is enough. And what I loved about this was how immediately Nadja knows that she has left the house and run away, because she can not only sort of like feel it in her soul, but also knows exactly what she would do if she felt like nobody was paying attention to her and she wanted to, as she put it, cause a bunch of drama. And this is one of those that I really appreciate how much Nadja rolls with it and admits that that's the situation. I feel like there's been a real sort of like, and this is something that I've mentioned recently, and I'm as guilty as anyone, but there's a lot of times where people sort of dismiss somebody doing something extreme as looking for attention, as if the fact that somebody wants attention inherently is sort of pitiful, and thus you should not pay attention because they are seeking it, and so you shouldn't give them what they're after. And this is one of those that I feel like I get what you mean if you're trying to keep somebody from constantly exhibiting bad behavior, they're trying to shock you, and if you don't give them the satisfaction of being shocked by their behavior, maybe they'll like give it up because they're just kind of bored. But it's turned into, we're going to dismiss literally everything anybody does if it seems like they want attention, up to and including often suicide attempts. It was just for attention. Okay. This person wanted attention so badly that they were willing to hurt themselves. Maybe they need attention. Maybe that's fine. That's a totally valid reason to do something. Like, look, you all know I thrive on attention. It is literally my entire income is attention. I have always wanted all of it. It's just who I am. But so it's like the kind of thing for me where, yeah, if I'm in a relationship and somebody is just like straight up neglecting me and not paying attention to me, that's a bad thing. And I think most of us would admit it. And yet, once somebody admits to wanting attention, it's like often put right into the same basket as being selfish or self-centered. No. People have different needs in that department, but everybody wants some kind of attention paid to them, whether it's on a large scale, a one-to-one scale, in personal relationships, group of friends, maybe for their achievements at work or academically. And I just really want to turn around the narrative of, oh, they just did it for attention, from being like, oh, okay, well then I guess we can just forget about it and dismiss it as important, and have it be like, oh, they're looking for attention. Are they not getting enough attention? Like, what's that about? And actually ask more questions. But anyway, so they go looking for her, and she immediately zeroes in on this toy shop and is like, I think that she's here because it's exactly what I would do, is go to a little toy store and try and convince or not even try to convince, just hope that some sweet little girl takes me home with her. And again, just her being like, this is what I would do. So I love when she says this is what she's doing because she lives in a house with a bunch of uncaring assholes. And Nandor says, do you think we're a bunch of uncaring assholes all the time? No. Sometimes, yes. Lately, a lot. And it turns out that she feels like this is all part of what's going on with her as well. So the doll was hanging out on the shelf with a bunch of stuffed animals. She jumps on Nandor and fights him from behind. I love, at one point she sword fights with him, and she's like really good and is actually aiming to kill him. But he chucks the doll, and it breaks and looks terrible. It's very limp and lifeless. And I'm sort of like, yeah, it doesn't look like she's in there anymore. What's going on? And then all of a sudden, this mannequin that's standing there is like, I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone. And the mannequin begins to like shuffle away. I don't know what they did with this mannequin. If it's just straight up like marionette strings or what. But the way this mannequin moved and how slow, it was so funny. It reminded me of like, you know, just an old lady getting really angry, just slow moving and not really able to give her motions the drama that she wishes she could. She's doing her best. She jumps into a statue, like she's moving from figure to figure, and eventually winds up inside this absolutely terrifying giant inflatable rat that I'm assuming was outside of like a pest control office or something like that. And this thing is just, if you saw this running down the street, I mean, I don't think you would even think it was running. You'd be like, it would have to be, oh, it's the wind, or, oh, it's a float. Oh my God. The eyes are like red. It's not even like regular eyes. It is just so creepy. And finally Nandor like punctures the inflatable rat and it slowly begins to deflate. And the doll is saying, just let me go. It would be easier for you. You have so much to do already without having to worry about me and my silly emotions. And Nadja says that, yeah, I have been busy, but you have to understand. I've been working so fucking hard in that house to be taken seriously, to get anyone to give me any respect. I've been trying to be professional, but I've been squishing down and mincing up my own silly emotions. And she stops and goes, oh. And I love the look on Nandor's face because he's listening to this entire conversation and genuinely does not seem to get it at all. And she's like, all right, look, I'm going to do better. I am going to try and pay more attention to you. And the doll is like, I'm tired. Jumping from one vessel to another takes a lot. And so she goes back into the doll. And Nandor says, for what it's worth, I also think you're doing a great job as co-leader. And they both just say to shut up. This isn't about you. And I'm taking the day off tomorrow. So this is just a moment where I'm like, look, I get what we're doing here. And I'm okay with it. I'm willing to go with it. But I don't see any evidence this is true. Like, not even to say that nobody respects her. I actually think that she seems somewhat respected in the household for the most part. I don't think anybody sees her as the boss necessarily. But I don't think that they dismiss her exactly either. And I feel that Nandor is actually maybe a little bit intimidated by her. So the like explanation, or sort of the thing that ties what's going on with her together with her ghost, I just don't really buy it. The whole like working to be taken seriously, it just felt like, and this is part of the canon that I'm going with in my head, when Nandor looks like he doesn't know what's going on in that scene, in my head, he is thinking to himself, really? You just made the noise like you had an epiphany and a big like revelation in a therapy session, but I don't see what you're talking about as being supported by any of the evidence. Because it just doesn't feel like she's very open with her emotions all the time, it seems to me. she's like expresses herself at the drop of a hat, and she doesn't seem to have any compunction about that. So what is she like holding back? I don't even know what that looks like for her. If this is her holding back, what is her letting it all out? But, you know, it's fine. It's like, it's not important really, but it just felt like this big, like, oh, we're going to tie this up. And I can't tell if it's purposely not really well tied up and the point is supposed to be that she came to the wrong conclusion, or if it is something that I'm supposed to believe. It's the first time that I've felt this way about almost any plot point on this show, where they seem to like get to a moment and I'm like, wait, what? Usually it's very clear what they're doing. So yeah, like I said, we have the whole thing with Nadja's doll later getting a bunch of attention, and she's fucking sword fighting him. And I love Nadja like doing the interview with her, because she is me. It means I have been neglecting the gorgeous, sweet, juicy, lovely, silly part of my own excellent personality. And what I've realized since I am her is that I need to communicate my emotional needs to everyone and myself. And she says, I love this little slut and I love you, my little whore. Okay, sure. Why not? So yeah, that's pretty much a wrap on that, but I'm very into like this weird doll situation. You guys know, ever since she has like been part of things and they have made it clear they're going to include her here and there they're not having her be like a major part of stuff, but the doll is around. We've seen her in other episodes, even if she hasn't been a big part of it. It just made me happy because it's such a weird little fun thing to throw in. So I'm glad she's back, and hopefully we get to see even more of her. So, all right, let's back up to the actual like cold open of this episode, because Colin and Laszlo are trying to find an appropriate boat to take them to Plum Island. And Plum Island is a real thing. Actually, when he said the name Plum Island, I was like, why is that ringing a bell? And then he describes it and I was like, right. It was like a place where there were all sorts of like experiments done. And I looked into this a lot more when I was younger because I lived in the area. And by the area, I mean like tri-state area. I don't mean like, you know, New York or anything like that. But the whole concept of Plum Island and the way that it was like kept out of bounds, essentially from like civilians, was fascinating in the way that anything, when you tell a kid like regular people aren't allowed to go here, that's always fascinating, you know? But it was, I think, if I remember correctly, it was like a lot of animal experimentation and stuff. It was just like, not good vibes, you know? So anyway, the whole premise is that they think there is potential information about Colin's heritage and the origins of energy vampires at Plum Island. And he found something like in the archives. We see him in a short flashback holding up like a big old-fashioned map that's labeled Plum Island. And so that's where he thinks that he needs to go. But they don't own a boat. So they show up to this dock and they just pick one that's about to be like taken out. And it's definitely like a party boat, you know? It's got string lights. And when I say string lights, I don't mean like fairy lights. I mean like those rope lights, you know, the ones that almost look like neon from far away, all around it. And there's like a lot of people there and they're drinking. And Laszlo just lands on it and like eats the guy who is at the wheel and throws him overboard, and everybody else flees. And they don't try to cover their tracks. They don't do anything to mitigate the bunch of witnesses who just saw this vampire attack. And I am really curious if there's ever going to be repercussions for the way that this is handled. Because, and I don't mean this like them specifically, but it does feel like they're kind of loosey-goosey sometimes with the way they handle victims and how careful they are with covering things up. Are there any like regulations about this with the Vampiric Council that they should, that, you know what I mean? Especially since they're sharing a home with these council members. Will it reflect even more poorly on them? Like, is this anything? Because they just let all these people who just saw him literally fly through the air and eat a man just run away. And they all saw it, I'm assuming. Otherwise, they wouldn't be running. So I guess that's just, they just assume nobody's going to believe them. It's fine. But anyway, they steal this boat and they head out. And as they are heading towards the island, there is this song that they hear somebody singing. And it is a very lilting minor key. It's very pretty. It's very simple. You know, it feels like it's only like 4 bars maybe. And we find out that Laszlo is a very experienced sailor. And I adore this, you guys, because we see, you know how this show always has the old-fashioned illustrations that are there to like emphasize a point Laszlo is making about his history and the things that he has experienced in the world. And they have Laszlo's face superimposed over some of these like paintings and stuff. And in a really quick look, maybe it looks fine. But if you pause these frames at all and look at how it really is done, it's so like sloppy and chintzy looking. It's just really bad. I just could not stop laughing. And he says something about scrubbing the poop decks. And Colin laughs and says poop decks. And he says, that's what it's called. Y'all, I remember when I was a kid finding out that there was a thing called a poop deck. I found this out, by the way, from the Narnia series, because there's a lot of ship stuff in the Prince Caspian and the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And I will tell you what, I was so sure there was going to turn out to be a link between the reason the poop deck is called the poop deck and the reason that human excrement, or excrement really of any kind, is called poop. It doesn't have to be human. Dog poop, cat poop, bird poop, poop. I thought they were linked. I never looked it up. I just assumed. So today, I get to this episode, and I'm like, you know what? I'm about to record on this, and I would like to know what the link is so that I can mention it on the show. And there isn't one at all. Completely nothing. The name for poop deck comes from the French word for the stern of a ship. So it was just basically like a fancy word for stern. And it was a high part on the back of a ship. Because like, if you are on a ship and you want to observe everybody working, and you want to be able to keep an eye on where you're headed and steer, the best place to be is all the way to the rear of a ship. I think a lot of us have this like mental image, if we're not as experienced. I know that as a kid, I always imagined if you're the captain that you are like somewhere toward the front of the ship and that the ship's wheel is at the front of the ship. And I never really stopped to think about how impractical it would be to have your back to everybody that you're supposed to be in charge of. And even when I see on like many television shows that involve ships that it's not set up that way, in my head, I still put it there. But yeah, the poop deck was like where everybody would go to oversee what was happening on the rest of the ship and get a good view and vantage point of that, as well as just where they are navigating to. And also found out in the midst of this research that the term swab the deck, I always thought was to clean the deck, but they swab decks to keep the wood of the deck wet because it prevents decay, and also it keeps it from being a fire hazard if they have any like flammable items on board. So the deck will be a lot less likely to catch fire if it is damp, which I had no idea that swab the deck was specifically like its own, basically wet the deck down. I always thought it was just another name for cleaning the deck. So I learned that today also. But the word poop for excrement, they don't even know where it comes from. They think that it maybe comes from an old English word for toot, or basically the sound like a horn makes when it blows, and that it was originally used to talk about farts, and then it progressed to talking about poop. And then the word pooping as a verb didn't come around for quite a while after that. So, yeah, poop deck and poop as a excrement, not related at all. I have been laboring under a delusion for literally years here, and I am just really kind of like mad about it. I just feel like there should be a link there, and I don't know what it would be. But I guess I would have assumed that like the poop deck was where they had the latrines, and so it's called Poop Ever After. But it's not, and I just feel like I've really been living a lie. So I wanted to mention that. Anyway, I love everything that when he says that I was in charge of sloops, battleships, brigantines, and every picture that they show from that moment on is the ship starting to go down or people being attacked by sharks on a lifeboat. He says that he was in charge of the Titanic for 2 seconds, and we see that going down. Some of these illustrations are actually done pretty well. There's the one where he's like helping attack a shark, looks pretty good. There's the one where he's a pirate, and that one looks pretty good. I was a little bit quick to make fun of them, but the first few are really bad. So they hear this song, and I like didn't notice what the title of the episode was, so I wasn't sure what was going on here, and I sort of was like, oh, is this going to turn out to be like part of what the deal is with the like experimentation? Is there like weird music or something involved in it? And I should mention, too, that Colin Robinson is putting sunscreen on, even though it's dark, because he thinks it feels nice. Truly, I hate it. But yeah, they both are like, wow, we really need to investigate what this is. And they both agree, and then all of a sudden, they stop and they're like, no, definitely not. Actually, this seems like it's probably a trap. It's Colin that says it first. Or no, it's Laszlo. I'm starting to think it could be a trap. And Colin's like, yeah, it definitely seems like it shouldn't be. Like, we shouldn't check it out. And then she begins singing again. And Laszlo, I think we should definitely investigate. So they head over, and Colin is over here like, already certain that there's going to be a beautiful woman involved. He has his like clothes that he's pulling on. There's a vibe of just, I want to look my best. When they get there, Laszlo says something about how she's been calling him, and Colin's like, well, actually, I've been sort of getting more of a vibe that it was from Colin beckoning, but you know, whatever. And the place that they've landed is, it looks like a giant trash heap at the back of a shipping building. There's definitely like warning, no trespassing. There's storage, there's lamps and stuff. This isn't just her territory, I don't think. But this chick is, I don't know the actress. I looked her up. She hasn't been in anything I've ever seen except for Home Sweet Home Alone, which she played like a really small part. But she comes out and she has this wild, high-pitched, girlish voice. And she has the feet and hindquarters of a chicken, I guess. Maybe a seagull? It's a real chicken, like the shape of the legs does not feel seagull-y. It feels like a chicken. It's just a horrible, like, disappointment to these two. They heard this song. They thought they were getting into something. She comes out, and I love how she starts, like, wiggling around like she really thinks that they are here for her. But because she stopped singing, they've lost interest. And I can't tell. She's doing something off to the side here. I think that this is just supposed to be that she lives off of whatever scraps are in this heap. Like she's a, this is why I kept saying seagull, because it felt like she's scrounging up the scraps. Oh my God. Asher says literally a chick. I didn't even think of that when I called her a chick. Oh, I'm so disappointed in myself. I can't believe I didn't notice that. Oh, it was right there. But yeah, she picks up a severed human arm with a wristwatch on and tilts her head back and opens her mouth and just gobbles that entire arm straight down her gullet in one shot. And this is when finally Laszlo turns around and is like, oh, wait a second. And he starts to look at the ground and says, I think this is a siren. And then she reaches into her mouth and she pulls the wristwatch out, which was just awful, just terrible. I really did not care for it. So then we get a beautiful moment where Colin turns to the camera and starts to talk about what sirens are and the like many different descriptions of their appearance that there have been through the years. And I love this. Laszlo just interrupts and says, yeah, they know what a fucking siren is. We've got to get out of here. I really appreciated we don't need to do this. Like, they're doing it because that's what they should do. And it's the right thing to do. But also, come the fuck on. You know what it is. At the same time, though, the mention that Colin made of how their appearances are different in all kinds of, like, varying mythologies did get me sort of curious. And when I went and looked back, I went to, like, check a couple articles about the description of what sirens looked like. And apparently in the Odyssey, they aren't described at all. They are just like, you know, the voices of beautiful women. But it's left up to the imagination of the reader what they look like. The description that was original to, like, the very first description was supposed to be that they were more like a mermaid. And that they had, you know, the siren of, like, oh, God, forgive me. I was going to say the siren from the Starbucks logo, for example. That is a Starbucks siren. But I often picture sirens as having birds' bodies, and evidently that sort of got conflated with harpies. So the description of them kind of became one and the same after a little while, and it seems to have settled a lot more permanently as like a bird bottom half and a woman's head top half. There are some descriptions, though, that harpies or that sirens are like sparrows, like they're really small and they have tiny, tiny little women's faces, which I don't know why, but that description, like I always picture, the size of a person, a human head, but a human-sized bird body. But what if it was just like a bird size, like a small bird size with a human bird size head? That one never entered my mind for a moment. And I just think that's somehow much creepier. So anyway, this girl, I love her. She's like dancing to herself and really acting like she's like super hot and that they can't resist her. She's got extremely the vibe of a chick who, I'm going to keep using that word, forgive me, who has had too much to drink at a bar and has determined that she will be going home with somebody that night. And she is overestimating her allure because of the fact that she is drunk. And there is something about making a siren only particularly hot when she's singing, and then the moment she stops, she still thinks she's hot shit, but it's not really working. That is really funny to me. There was just something about her energy that I was like, I've met this girl. I might have been this girl. And at this point, Laszlo like tries to turn into a bat and just fly away. And she starts singing again, and he comes right back and is like, that is the most beautiful song I have ever heard. They get completely wrapped up in this again. And finally, he does get away. There's this great moment where the two of them are like back to back. They are looking to be like they're tied up. Colin says something like, if you move, I can get my head down and maybe chew through these ropes. And he's like, Laszlo says, we're not even tied up. It's fine. So Colin starts to think that he might actually be into her. Every time she starts singing, he is turning around and being like, oh no, I'm into it. But Laszlo is saying, I feel about her the way I feel about the first moment that I met Nadja. And that's how I know I'm being enchanted, which is really sweet, actually. But also, we know that she did like enchant him. So there's also a part of me that's kind of like, oh no, that feels loaded, actually. And he turns into a bat. He heads back to the mainland. And then he gets help from Guillermo and is like, I need a device that will make it so that I cannot hear. Guillermo wants to just go into Best Buy and get some noise canceling headphones. But Laszlo, predictably, gets pulled way off track by a Best Buy team member named Judy, who is talking to him about the various offerings that they have in terms of sound systems, speakers, headphones, just the stereo system, everything surrounding that. You can spend such an insane amount of money. And I actually really enjoyed the comparison between the siren song that you can't resist of an actual siren and the siren song of a salesperson. This was very amusing to me. Y'all, I am so like embarrassed thinking back on this. There was a time where when I was very first married, and this is why you shouldn't let people who don't know how finances work out into the world. But I was not well educated on the deal with credit. I was always told that it was just basically like stay away from credit cards because they will ruin your life. And I did. And I was with Brendan. We were at a Best Buy and we wanted to get I don't remember if it was like an Xbox or what, but the sales associate said, do you want to try applying for a Best Buy credit card? And we were like, all right, fine. I was sort of less enthused about it, but Brendan was like, it's no big deal. We won't get approved. So go ahead. And then we'll just be, they get credit for having tried to get somebody to buy a card or to take a card, and we won't get approved. So nothing will happen. And we got approved for a limit of like $3,000. And at that point, Brendan and I lost our entire shit and essentially were like, oh, so that means we can buy $3,000 of stuff? And we did. We did. Right there, right away. We didn't get it. We didn't understand really what was happening. And so we got like a new TV. We got like soundbar speakers things. We got extra controllers. We got, we spent almost up to the limit that we could. And I still think back on that moment sometimes and I'm just like, oh, sweetie. Like now I know credit cards are not as much of a demon. They can ruin your life if you're not careful with them, but they're also really useful for managing your credit score and stuff if you're careful with them. So I'm not as afraid of them as I once was, but wow, did I not get it. And Brendan didn't get it either. And we just we got into like all this debt in one day just because. So this whole thing with him suddenly deciding that he wants everything, I was like, man, oh no, I've been here. The difference is he doesn't go into debt because he goes up to the guy at the door and tells him that he's not going to be paying for anything. He isn't going to need the extended warranty. And he doesn't need a Best Buy card or credit card or membership card. And then this guy had just asked him to punch in his email. And Laszlo had stopped him. He says again, but we really do need your email to keep you updated about, the Geek Squad, yeah. Oh, okay, no problem at all. L. Cravensworth at nyconnex.com. I have no idea what my home phone number is. And so Guillermo has to tell him. But yeah, they roll out of there and they have 2 huge carts loaded with stuff. And I really hope there's cameras. There's like what looks like a Keurig. I can't even tell. I am trying to tell whether or not any of this is actually going to show up in the house later, but I kind of hope it does. Guillermo, he looks like he's turning around with the carts and rolling back into the store because Laszlo just grabs the noise-canceling headphones and flies away. So I don't know if I want an episode of them fucking around with gadgets and stuff. I think that would be really fun. There's a lot of potential there, But anyway, so fucking Colin, who has been left with the Siren, is genuinely into it, and they are doing a little karaoke bit with each other, and he is having a really good time. It was a little bit moving because Colin seems to not, he just doesn't connect with anybody, and so he'll often be sitting there by himself having fun at the expense of other people, but you just don't really see him having fun with somebody in a way that feels like, oh yeah, we're really seeing each other, except for that one other energy vampire where they talked about their the way they drained people, and this Siren says something about how most people don't like me when I'm not singing. And is really excited that he's like into her, and she gets excited and she shits on his shoe. So awful. Laszlo shows up to rescue him, and he has to convince Colin to come with him, and he's not even like successful. He basically just manages to get his arms around him and fly away with him, while Colin is still arguing that actually this is real. And I felt so bad. I was just like, I'm kind of rooting for him, you know? He says, when she's singing, I can't resist her. And when she's not singing, I don't want to resist her. And Laszlo's like, dude, do you see her swallowing that whole fish over there? He's mad. So he just picks him up and like flies off with him. And I was just like, oh, bummer. So when we go back to the house, because Colin is like ready to just walk away, Colin is downstairs and he is like trying to act as if, oh yeah, I think maybe I wasn't actually in love really anyway. I think that it was probably not real. It was all part of the enchantment. But he's saying it with this like, I don't know, maybe you should stop me kind of vibe. And Laszlo has to be like, it wasn't real, dude. It wasn't. But I feel like it was. And I feel like Colin should go back there. So Colin then has this radio, and he has like tuned into the channel that they were picking up on her when they were on the boat. And he's listening to it, and he just tells the camera guys to leave him alone so that he can beat off to the music that she's singing. I want him to go back to her. Like, what'll that look like? No idea. Don't care. It's weird. It's just a weird like pairing that doesn't work, and I'm into it. I don't know. Maybe the fact that it doesn't work is what I like about it, you know? There's just something really like, it's just very off-putting. And I also just kind of want to know more about what her deal is. Like, she clearly seems to just live in that one spot. And are there other Siren? Like, what's the deal? Would she ever be tempted to eat him? It seemed like she was really bummed when Laszlo dragged him away. She started crying until she saw the camera guys, who evidently got away okay. But yeah, so that's pretty much this episode. It was just a weird one. It felt like it was all over the place a little bit. It was fun. It was just strange. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. But thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. Thank you to Asher and Miss T. And thank you to Max for commissioning this. And I will see you soon with a new one. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.